Well, the Trump shooting, what we know now that we did not know then. This and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crime Talk.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
All right, folks, thank you for joining us. James and I have a great program lined up today. We're going to be talking about the last podcast, which was entitled What We Know Now That We Did Not Know Then, about the Trump shooting. And James, boy, a whole lot of things have come out since the last time we talked, right?
There have been a whole lot. There's been a lot of analysis on the angles of the shot and everything.
Yes, a lot of news for us to cover tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you, Charlie. Well, here at Charlie Crimebuster, we welcome comments, suggestions, and opinions. And even if you disagree with our point of view on any topic, it's a free space, and we still want to hear from you. So you can reach out to us with what we call a shout out, right, Charlie?
Yeah, reach out with a shout out.
That's right. You can email Charlie at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And you can also visit our Peacemaker Network, where there you can support our men and women, first responders, law enforcement, military personnel by becoming a badge, BADGE member. And that's simply $3 a month. That's less than a penny a day. Again, that's peacemakernetwork.com.
Yeah, and the great thing about that, James, too, is not only do they help us with the podcast, but they help us help those brave men and women that we talk about running toward danger instead of away from danger, right?
Right, just like those Secret Service men that covered our former president, Donald Trump.
Yep, no doubt about it. Brave men and women that put their lives between him and a bullet, you know?
Right. And as we will discuss later, there were many more shots that could have hit many of those officers.
Yes, it's really, certainly we mourn the loss of that wonderful hero, that firefighter who put his life between the assassin and his family. And also we feel for the other two victims that were shot. But James, it could have been a whole lot worse. It could have been a lot more fatalities. Thank God there wasn't. Well, we've covered a lot of material over the last 2 weeks in the incident altogether with our podcast and also our crime talk. And folks, if you don't know what we're talking about, you can actually go to charliecrimebuster.com, and there we have all of our podcasts as well as our crime talk shows. And you can do that at youtube.com as well. Yeah. We certainly are excited about our YouTube channel. We want to encourage the folks out there, if they have not yet hit that subscribe button, please do so. Also to turn on their alerts so they'll know when we drop the next podcast. That's right. You can also visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/Charlie Crimebuster, and just send us a like or send us a note or give us a comment. We'd be more than happy to give some feedback there as well. Yes, that's the truth. Come on, folks. Let's hear from you. That's right. So what have we learned thus far about Thomas Crooks, other than what has already been disclosed in general public? Well, we, when I did this podcast, I was taking it on the premise of, that terrible day, because we called it a horrible day in our podcast. That horrible day, we knew absolutely nothing about Thomas Crooks, but now we know he lived near Butler, about 40 miles away from there or so. We also know that his parents, amazingly enough, are counselors and seem to be a very, very good, outstanding family. And as far as we know now, with everything that's come out, we don't have any reason to believe that they suspected their son of anything. And so, can you imagine being a parent to a child who actually tried to kill the former president? That must be a very, very terrible position for these parents to be in. Yeah, Thomas Crooks was an academic scholar. He was doing very well in school. Actually was very good at math. Yeah, math and science. In fact, he actually graduated from community college with an engineering and science degree. Also was awarded in high school because of his math and science knowledge, received some sort of
acknowledgement, and also I think of cash reward for his outstanding schoolwork. So here is a young man who had a bright future ahead of him, but he took that wrong turn somewhere, and now he becomes not only we talk about people that are known. He is renowned, renowned, and what he's doing. The other thing that we do find, though, when we dig into what some people are telling us about him, they do say that he was a very quiet person, and that he was socially awkward, and that maybe perhaps there are people who have reported that he had been bullied, which kind of leads us toward what we're going to be what we talked about in the podcast, that it appeared, James, that Thomas Crooks did not really fit the profile of a political assassin.
No.
And why I say that, because of the fact that when we look at it, he didn't really have any political ideology that put him in either camp.
Correct.
And on top of that, he didn't, we don't see anything where he put out a manifesto or something like that. In fact, as we talked about there, it actually looks like, and in fact, I think I used a quote that he actually appeared more like a 21st century school shooter than he did a political assassin.
Right. Yeah. He fit that profile.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
Being bullied, being socially awkward.
Right.
So those two factors right there would have made him a high school shooter for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you look at it, when you take a political assassin and put it toward a mass shooter, which is what a high school shooter is, or a school shooter is, you basically, he fits more of the profile of a mass shooter than he does that of a political assassin.
Amazing. Just 20 years of age.
Right. Yeah.
Simply 20 years of age, and makes it a wrong choice.
Right.
Wow. Well, in your podcast, you mentioned leakage. Can you give us a little more information about leakage?
Yeah, this is a term that's used by those who study these type of shootings, and leakage very simply means that it's signs that they give of their intentions, whether it is intentionally or not intentionally. It is basically signs that they can pick up from people prior to the event.
So what about the digital footprint that you spoke about as well? Because I knew there was quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. The digital footprint in this is actually very huge. And as you and I have said over and over again on these programs, we all of us today, I mean, unless you're some hermit living in a cave, we all leave a digital footprint. And in his digital footprint, one of the things, and again, it brings us back into that profile, he was actually reading and studying and looking up high school shootings. Particularly, he seemed to be fascinated with the one that happened in Oxford, Michigan, the teenage school shooter there. And he was looking at that. We also know that by looking at his digital footprint, he even had a whole list of people that he was Googling that appeared to be potential targets. So, I guess my question is, James, if that Trump rally had not appeared there in Butler, Pennsylvania, near where he was, he may have been lining up sites to do something at the Democratic convention coming up.
He also looked up the distance Lee Harvey Oswald had to make to take the shot with President Kennedy.
That's right. Yeah, that was right there. I mean, you talk about a red flag there. That is a big, big red flag. Something else, too, that, again, puts Thomas Crooks into the profile of a mass shooter. He looked up the term major depressive disorder. And so it appears that, he was battling depression. And as we say often about these shooters, they live very unfulfilled lives. They don't feel like they matter. They don't feel like they have value. They discount themselves and they say, hey, I'm not, nobody knows me, but they're sure going to know me after I do this event. And that, appears to be the same profile that we're seeing when we really look very carefully at Thomas Crooks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how that the Lee Harvey Oswald profile and Thomas Crooks profile are very, very similar.
Yeah, they're the real difference again.
Reconnaissance, leaving the rifle.
Yeah. The only difference there is what we really look at is that Oswald did have this ideology. You can actually tie him in. Remember, he went to Russia, and also, he went to Mexico, and so he did have some kind of philosophy or ideology, where when Crooks, we really can't find anything like that. I mean, he was a registered Republican, and yet he gave money to a Democratic cause, so he just didn't. Again, I think it's very, very evident that he's more of a mass shooter profile than a lone assassin.
It sounds like he was very conflicted.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And I hope that parents that might be listening to us, that's why it's so important to do your very best to involve yourself in the lives of your children, who then become teenagers, and try to make sure that they are living fulfilled lives. That they're living rich lives and full lives, and that they have that they love their life so much that they would never ever think that they're not worth anything, and that they would have to do something like this to get attention or to be known.
Right. That's actually a good PSA.
Yeah, sure is. Yeah.
Public service announcement for us to broadcast at some point.
No doubt about that.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot about the interviewing of the head of the Secret Service. Why were lawmakers upset with her?
Oh man, they were. I mean, if you listen to that particular area where the head of the Secret Service, where she was actually, Mrs. Chittle was coming and sitting down before them. Yeah, it really amazed me. These guys and gals seem to be really, really upset. And of course, and I mean, there's a really good reason for that.
They're politicians.
Yeah, well, that plus the fact that she dodged every question almost. I mean, she wasn't forthcoming. No. They were wanting to hear something from the Secret Service to say, why did this horrible, horrible day happen? And as I said in the podcast, she dodged so much that she should be a dodgeball champion.
Yeah,
because she just dodged all these questions, And another thing that I thought that was really, really glaring, I mean, and she did say, I take full responsibility for it. And later, we know after that day, she resigned. Right. But she did say, I take full responsibility for it. But it did not appear that she was really focused on, hey, this is a terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy. We dropped the ball and we got to find out what's happening. She did not even visit the scene. And that seemed to really set off the lawmakers. Wow. Because one of them commented, well, even Crooks, the perpetrator, took more than one visit to the scene. He actually came out beforehand, and visited the scene. And you haven't even been there one time. So, yeah, they were pretty upset about her performance during that particular hearing.
There were several lawmakers that actually went to the site. From
yes,
what I understand, they were actually stood on the roof where he was.
Yeah,
he had been
I mean, I understand that she has a very large organization that she oversees, and she has a lot of people she delegates things to. But I can't help but think that you, James, me, or anybody that's listening to us, if the greatest, most glaring failure of the Secret Service, certainly in this century, if that had happened, I would be on that scene looking at it, saying, "Hey, what went wrong here? We got to fix this." But
exactly.
She didn't even bother to show up.
Well, was there a communication breakdown as well? Not just failure on the Secret Service, but also with the multiple agencies involved?
Yeah, and this is really, really kind of sad, because I think probably the greatest lesson when you go back to that time, and James, I know that you will be able to tell me, and I'm sure every one of our listeners will be able to tell us, that they can probably remember where they were when 9/11 took place.
Oh, yeah.
When that terrible, terrible tragedy there took place in our nation, and we actually were under attack as a nation. And, but one lesson that came out of all of that and we thought that it was a lesson that we all knew about, and certainly this makes this very glaring, is that they had so many agencies responding to 9/11 that they could not talk to each other. They were all on different channels, different wavelengths. And it appears here, and when you look at this horrible day that went wrong with this shooting, this attempted assassination of former President Trump, it appears that the same thing happened because they were not all talking together on the same channel. I mean, they had a lot of supporting agencies there that day, but the most glaring thing is that this guy was suspicious. He had been viewed as suspicious. He was roaming around there. They even knew at one time he was on the roof, and yet that was not communicated to the people that were personally handling former President Trump's protection. Those guys right around him, they did not know this, because I am convinced if they had known this, they would not have allowed him to get on the stage, and they would have gotten him off of that stage as quickly as possible. But that was not conveyed. So there was a big, huge communication error that I'm sure that's going to come out as we see more and more of this develop in this story.
Right. Well, you mentioned, I mentioned about him laying on the roof. We got roof, and more roof. What's that all about?
Roof, and more roof. Yeah. Well, if there's one thing that's glaring in this episode or in this scenario, I should say, not our episode, but in this scenario, I mean, you would have to, a kindergarten could look at this thing and say, hey, why, how in the world did he get on a roof with direct sight to the former president and make that shot? Why was that roof not covered? That no matter what else we find out about this, that's always going to be the center of this investigation. Why wasn't the roof covered? Now, we've heard all kinds of excuses. One excuse was it was too hot, which is ridiculous. I mean, there are other people on the roof. Yeah,
he got up there and laid down. Must not have been too hot.
Yeah. You're right there. And also, you remember we talked, I think, last week about that incredible, and this was from the head of the Secret Service. The roof was too slanted, which is crazy. Really crazy. Another one was that it was too short-staffed, that they didn't have enough people to cover it, which, that doesn't make sense either.
Nope.
You have somebody call out, you get somebody else to come in. But, I think, and I've heard this, and I believe that this is probably the closest thing to what really happened. We'll find out for sure. But the closest thing to what happened, I believe, is there was two agents in a second story of a building that had visual access to that roof. However, it is reported that those two agents or those two officers, whatever agency they were with, had actually left that place to go to try to find this suspicious person, which is incredible because by doing that, they left the one place where this threat became, an issue. And so it all comes back to that roof. Why wasn't it covered? And in my opinion, not only should it have been covered, there should have been Secret Service agents on that roof. And why that did not happen, I think it's just a very, very glaring error on the part of the Secret Service.
Well, within the actual known parameter of line of sight, there's a water tower.
Right.
That they could have put someone there.
Yeah, they could have. There could have been someone there. And then also there could have been aerial surveillance, of it. There's so many other ways they could have covered that roof. But when it gets down to it, the bottom line is, James, the roof wasn't covered.
Right.
If it was covered, he would have never gotten up there and made that shot.
But we have since found out that it wasn't these ones that looked like they were pointed towards the roof, that the Secret Service that made the shot. It was the other team, the South team, that actually made the shot.
Yeah. Now
they were able to respond and just a little over 5 seconds.
Right. Yeah. You saw that they actually had to reposition themselves to make the shot.
Yep.
And I think the thing about that, and there probably is some. I'm not giving the Secret Service, Miss Cheeto, any accolades here, but there was a slight slant on that roof, and that could have been what kept the guys on the other roofs from being able to see him as he crept up there to that roof. That could have played into that, but that doesn't negate the fact that somebody else should have been responsible for that roof other than those guys on those other roofs,
Right.
But nonetheless, they did and they did acquire the target pretty quick after he shot, and they did take him out, within seconds, which is a good part about it, because if they hadn't have, there would have been more fatalities, because, he had a lot of ammo with him. He could have made a lot more of those shots.
Oh, definitely. I mean, he was able to get off 5 shots after the first 3.
First
3 that injured 2 people in the or 3 killed 1 and injured 2, and also injured the former president. That was out of the first 3 shots. The remaining 5,
right,
they went nowhere. Been able to account for. So,
right, yeah. He and again, why did he do it? Because he was on that roof, and again, that roof was not covered,
Well, in your podcast, what was it that was most glaring or stood out to you the most?
Well, one of the things is, we have in our podcast before, and in some of the information, because we try to not only talk about true crime, but we try to leave some information with our people that can help them be more safe. And we did go over what we call the stages of a mass shooter. And I think that those stages was very evident here. There was the fact that there was planning that was done in this stage, and that's the first stage of it.
Mm-hmm.
You can see where he had looked up these things online. He had already planned that he might need a ladder to get on the roof, and he purchased a ladder.
Mm-hmm.
He had ammo with him. And the next thing that we look for in a mass shooter is not only is there a planning stage, but there's a practice stage. And we do know that the Friday before he went to the range. And we do know that another time he was at the range not too long before this event. And he was actually going through some training. And there was another man right next to him that was taking the same training. So there was that practice. So we see this so often. We had an event here in the Orlando area or Daytona area, where because somebody saw something and said something, they actually stopped a young man who was coming back from the range and had planned that very day to go to one of the colleges and do a mass shooting. So to our listeners out there, if you can see someone in any of these stages, you might be able to say something and keep something like this from happening.
Mm-hmm.
So there was indeed the planning, there was indeed the practicing, and then there was procurement. You have to have the tools to pull something like this off. And in this situation, he got a ladder, he got an ammo. He went to the store and bought him an ammo can. He actually had ordered hazardous materials online, so he had a bicycle with him there that day.
Mm-hmm.
So he procured equipment and material to enable him to do this shooting. And then, of course, after that, there is also what I call the placement, which is before you get to wherever you're going, you got to go through different places to get there. Mm-hmm. That's why we tell people that you need to watch that. We call it a perimeter. There is a middle perimeter. There's an inside perimeter. Then there's a middle perimeter, and then there's an outer perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can catch a mass shooter in those perimeters before they get to their target, then sometimes you can prevent a mass shooting. This guy was in a place where it could have been prevented.
Right.
They saw him suspicious. If they had taken the time and ran him down and say, we're going to take this guy in for questioning, it's amazing what they would have found out, And then,
right.
Of course, there is the participation. And in this situation, during the participation time, they did take him out. So I think what stood out to me is again, what we've said at the very beginning of the podcast. He had the profile of a mass shooter, not a political assassin. And as having that profile, there was those stages that you could see very clearly when you look back after the fact.
Right. So you said there's a new timeline as well?
Yes, well, there's a more clear timeline, and it really is big, James, when you look at it. And the biggest thing that really comes out of it, that 510, we find that he was first identified 510 that afternoon as a person of interest. 530, he was actually spotted with a rangefinder. And then here is the crazy part of it. At 5:52, now this is literally 20 minutes before the first shot is fired, Crooks was spotted on the roof by the Secret Service. So you have to ask yourself, James, how could this happen? If the Secret Service saw him on that roof 20 minutes before he fired those shots, why did not something happen to prevent this from happening? That is incredible to me.
Do you think they were trying to confirm that it was in fact a civilian versus a one of the officers?
Yeah, but they all had radios. They should be able to confirm that in how many seconds, you think? Shouldn't take them 20 minutes to do that,
Well, as we discussed before, there was a communication breakdown.
Exactly. But I mean, and I, that's the first thing I thought. Well, maybe they thought, he was one of some of those agencies that was going up there. But if they had their act together, James, they would have known where every person was in that party. They would have known where all their people were. They would have known that there wasn't anybody on the roof, and there should never be anybody on the roof, and that should have alerted them immediately. But again, this was a classical failure,
So if someone was assigned to the roof but didn't show because they called out sick or whatever, and then you get someone that does crawl up on the roof and appears to be, with a rifle, they automatically assume that particular officer is in place, and so therefore they don't take any steps to confirm.
Yeah, if you're the Keystone Cops, but these aren't the Keystone Cops, James. These are the elite. These are the experts. These are the guys that know that if nobody showed up, nobody's going to be on the roof. And if somebody suddenly creeps up on the roof, you certainly say to yourself, "Hey, nobody's supposed to be there." Yeah. We got to get on this right away. We can't sit here for 20 minutes and decide, well, maybe not. We're talking about the safety and the protection of the protectee, and you just can't do that kind of stuff. So I think this is the thing that if this timeline is true, and it was the one that was brought to lawmakers by law enforcement, if this timeline is true, this is a glaring error that, you got to sit there 20 minutes. The guy was on the roof before he fired, and it's just that timeline in and of itself is just really, 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 really incredible.
Well, I would in analyzing this, I'm doing, armchair analyzing. I'm not an expert in this field, but if I were to look at this from the perspective of a Secret Service agent or an agency, and I'm thinking that there's someone crawling on a roof after he's on the platform, trying to get into position, when my thought would be, why are you now getting into position? You were supposed to be in position before we went on stage.
Well, sure. Yeah. And one thing you're trained in law enforcement and in this kind of work, you're trained that if anything looks out of place, anything looks out of place.
Yep.
You got to move on that, and that is just
security
101, security 101,
exactly.
This does not look, if there's something wrong here,
right?
And you've got to respond, and with something like this, you've got to respond quickly. You can't, say 20 minutes. So, well, let's just figure out what's going on here. You don't have that time. Not when somebody is suddenly observed in an area where they could take a rifle and make a shot. And he was observed in an area where he did take a rifle and he did take a shot,
Right.
I mean, at the very at the very worst, at the very least, I guess I should say, that should have alerted them. Like, if he's on the stage, let's get him off the stage, and put a halt on things, or at least let's do something. Let's not just sit here and say, wonder what that guy's up to. You just can't sit around and say, hey, well, that's interesting. That guy's crawling on the roof there,
Yeah.
Crawling on the roof. Now, is he one of us or one of them? We don't know. Again, every person's role around that area should have been well defined and well known, and somebody should have been able to say, there should not be anybody on that roof.
Agreed. When they had the public
on that roof, yeah,
they had the public shouting.
Hey,
he's on the roof. He's on the roof.
Even the public realized that this isn't right. Something's wrong here.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. Yeah.
Well, what is that one thing that will tell us more?
Well, the one thing that I think that will tell us more is that in every one of these situations, there is, first of all, a operations plan. Now, they're called a lot of different things, and different agencies have their cute little initials, for them,
Yep.
But basically, it's a plan of action. And there was a plan of action that had already been designed, and they haven't released that, by the way. They're keeping that very close to the chest because, and maybe there are some situations in there that they can't release because it might reveal some of the techniques of the Secret Service. But that plan of action should have shown why that roof wasn't covered. It should have shown that somebody should have been there, or how was it covered, etc. And the next report that comes out is really important, is that whenever you have events like this, you always have not only a plan of action, but you have what is called an after action plan, where your after action report, where you basically go down and say, let's take a look at it. Here's what happened. What can we do to what went wrong, and what can we do to improve it? And I think once those are released, if they're ever released, and they may never be released, but at least people should be able to have access to that who need to make the changes to keep the protectees safe in the future.
Well, do you think there should be another Warren Commission?
Oh boy, I don't know. Look what happened with the Warren Commission on the Kennedy assassination.
Exactly.
It basically was nothing. I mean, it was incorrect. Yeah. I certainly think there should be a lot of reflection, and there are a lot of hearings we know that's scheduled with this. But here's the problem, James. Whatever they're going to do, they need to do it quick. I mean, we're right in the middle of a campaign. They're going to be a lot of events for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the DNC coming up next month. Actually, 15 days.
Yeah, and if there's something that needs to be fixed, it needs to be fixed. Not 6 months down the line at some kind of committee hearing. It needs to be fixed right now. Quickly. Right. And so there needs to be some real reflection quickly taken, and some action taken that would take these security breaches and certainly do something to fix them.
I agree. So would you happen to have a crazy quick story for us today?
Well, I'd like to talk about our crazy crook story. The people have not heard the podcast. They need to go back and listen to it, if nothing else, for the crazy crook story, because this was a really doozy. This was our guys. So there were several of them. They were pretty smart. They actually had stolen a Kia. They took that Kia and they rammed it through the fence of this big dealership. And they took these big, huge, expensive trucks, pickup trucks, and 10 of them they stole, and they left. The only problem, James, they ran out of gas. Because those big old trucks, buddy, those big old pick-em-up trucks, they drink a whole lot of gas. And these guys just did not really think about the fact that they had enough gas to get away. And they didn't have enough gas to get away. And that's how they got caught, because that's why they're really crazy crooks, don't you think?
So, folks, if you want to hear that crazy crook story, you need to go back and visit our prior podcasts, because you can certainly hear exactly how many trucks were actually left
Oh
empty
yeah,
of fuel.
it was incredible. It was really, really incredible. And we'd like to tell those stories to kind of lighten the load a little bit. And the amazing thing about it is, James, is we never run out of them.
Yeah.
You know,
you're gonna say we can't make this stuff up.
No, we really can't. It's some incredible, crazy Crook stories out there.
All right.
So, James, we're thinking about our next podcast coming down the line, and one of the things about our next podcast is that we always try, as you know, to stay current with what's happening in the time. So anytime our plans can change, like, we never thought, a month ago that we would be talking about an attempted shooting of former President Trump.
That's right.
But it happened, so then we, of course, geared ourselves to do this kind of podcast. So we never really know. But I was thinking, James, that we might take another look at the Rust trial that we covered.
Right.
Remember, it was dismissed because of mishandling of the prosecution.
Right.
But what if it had not been dismissed? What if it had gone through the entire trial? What would have happened? Mm-hmm. Would he be guilty or innocent? And I think we might try to move into that next week and visit that and give the audience what we think would have happened had the trial not been called off because of, I call it a technicality. And it was a technicality, a very, very large technicality where his constitutional rights were violated. And of course, the case was dismissed for prejudice, meaning he can't be charged again. But what if that had never happened? Mm-hmm. What would we have seen in the trial? What kind of information would have been revealed? And what would the jury really, really say? So this next week, I think we're going to go back and revisit that. And I think that would be a very informative program. And I think our folks would, maybe they would like to, let us know now what they think so that we can kind of take in what they think and put that into our mind as we prepare the next podcast.
All right. I'll put together another poll and we'll ask the audience to give us their opinion on what they think the outcome would have been.
There you go. Yeah.
And
right, it'd be interesting to see if the poll would reflect differently from the first poll we took, right at the beginning of the series. So that would be really great. I think that would be really neat.
Yep. 52% said guilty, 22% said not guilty, and 22% said unsure.
Yeah, I'd like to see how that stacks up since this case has been dismissed for prejudice. That would be really interesting. And we'll tell you what we think about it in the next podcast. All right.
Thank you for your time, Charlie.
So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep. For the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.